I was just 16 years old, and I picked up the phone to make a call to a friend, and I heard my dad talking to someone. He said my mom had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I quickly hung up the phone and felt really confused. I didn't even really know what Alzheimer's was, and nobody told me. I don't blame my parents. I think for them, they were completely overwhelmed and confused as well. It was back in the late 80s, and I don't know that many people knew much about Alzheimer's. We soon were to learn during the journey, finding out as we went, finding resources as we could, and doing the best that we could. Hi, this is Rayna Neises, your host of A Season of Caring podcast, where there's hope for living, loving, and caring with no regrets. And today we're going to discuss Alzheimer's disease, some of the basics. Last week, we had an opportunity to talk with Lauren, who was also young when her mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. She experienced many of the same emotions I did, so I just thought I would take an opportunity to talk to you more about the disease and some of the things that we do know and some of the things you might not be aware of. The National Institute on Aging defines Alzheimer's like this. Alzheimer's is a brain disorder that slowly destroys memory and thinking skills and eventually the ability to carry out the simple tasks. In most people with Alzheimer's, symptoms first appear later in life. Estimates vary, but experts suggest that more than 6 million Americans, most 65 or older, may have dementia caused by Alzheimer's. This definition of Alzheimer's disease alone brings up questions for many people. What's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? Such a great question. I am honored to be a volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association, and I'm able to share with people in an educational setting a lot of information about Alzheimer's and dementia. So let's start talking about dementia. Dementia is an umbrella term, and I always like to say it's a general term. Dementia is the collection of symptoms that people display when they have certain specific diseases. So Alzheimer's is one specific type of dementia. Lewy body is also a specific type, and you might also have heard of frontal temporal lobe dementia as well as vascular dementia. There are actually many forms of dementia. And the reason why there are different kinds of dementia is because the physical cause of the symptoms varies depending on what's happening in the brain that causes those symptoms. So Alzheimer's is the number one cause, but research is slowly finding mixed dementia is actually rising in the number of people that they're discovering the cause of their dementia symptoms. And mixed dementia is just two or more root causes of the actual symptoms themselves. When we're thinking about Alzheimer's disease, always the first thought is about memory loss. And actually, memory loss might not be the very first symptom that people experience of Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's actually impacts the brain, and so it impacts thinking, remembering, and reasoning, and the behavioral abilities to such an extent that it interferes with daily life. So right there, we can start to realize that there could be some thinking, remembering, and reasoning that's being impacted that isn't impacting daily life yet. So the time in which many people are diagnosed, they're actually farther along in the disease than they realize because they've had symptoms earlier on. They just didn't have that significant of an impact in their life. So scientists are finding that the organic changes in the brain are actually happening well before most symptoms are being seen. And when I say well before, we're talking 20 years or more before the symptoms actually appear and definitely impact the daily life of the person. So I think it's important that we understand more about what's happening in the brain and how that can impact our daily lives. When we realize that Alzheimer's is not just about memory, but it's also about thinking and problem solving, then we begin to see that possibly managing money, remembering passwords, doing some of our daily tasks that we have done for a long time might begin to be a problem. Another thing that people notice is or become concerned about is walking into a room and forgetting why they're there, or forgetting where they've put their keys, or forgetting where the remote is. These are typical forgetting things that can cause people to stop and ask, oh, is there something wrong with me? The key to realizing if it is something to be concerned about or not is, can you retrace your steps? Can you eventually access that information? With Alzheimer's, the brain cells are actually dying. And so these are not memories or things that people can access. Once the cell has died, there's no way to remember it again. So realizing that being forgetful is completely different than actually the process of the brain dying and actually losing memories. Another area of Alzheimer's that many people are not aware of, and Lauren mentioned in episode 101 about her mom, was the ability for the brain to interpret what the eyes are seeing. And Lauren shared some specific things that her mom began to struggle with that she didn't realize were actually symptoms of Alzheimer's. And I as well can remember my mom's progression of her disease and definitely did not realize that her visual perceptual issues were related to the damage that was happening within her brain. Mom really struggled with bumping into doorways, sometimes sitting and missing the chair. Those visual issues were really a concern. And we found that even walking became kind of scary to her because she lost that perception. And so if she held your hand, she would just walk right along beside you. But when she was walking on her own, she might follow the hallway with her hand and walk slowly to be sure that she didn't miss a step somewhere or something like that. So those visual perceptual things are very important to consider, and realizing that not only are they not able to process what they're seeing, but their vision is becoming impaired. It's becoming more like tunnel vision. And as the disease progresses, they actually move from regular peripheral vision. It moves in and closes in on them like tunnel vision. So if you were to imagine you had a scuba mask on and you could only see straight ahead in that small window of space, you can begin to see why there would be so many things in their environment that startle them or that they aren't even aware of that are happening. As the disease progresses, they actually get to a point where they almost have binoculars on, can only see maybe binocular vision, like they were looking through binoculars. And so that really closes in on them. And that vision has a big impact on their quality of life. And on you as a caregiver, being aware of how their vision is being impaired can make a big difference in the way that you approach them, the way that you remember to talk with them about where something is on the table, or getting them to drink as their disease progresses. Oftentimes, we have difficulty keeping them hydrated. They don't see the cup. They don't have the coordination to get it to their mouth because their vision is really impaired. So being aware of the vision can be a big piece as well. We know their language, their ability to communicate with you becomes impaired. They have trouble finding their words. They might stumble over things as they're trying to communicate with you or call something by the wrong name. But we often forget to think about that's the output from the brain, but the input is also impaired. As the disease progresses, we find that they can't receive more than 4 words and be able to understand them. So that means like every 4th word or every 5th word. So when you're communicating with them and you're saying a sentence, they're losing it after the 4th word. So when you think about maybe cutting in and out on a cell phone, that reception where you're hearing every third or fourth word and that's all you hear, how hard it is to follow the conversation and be able to really engage with that person on the phone. As the disease progresses, those things happen with their brain as well. They're losing words, they're missing words, so they're not able to comprehend what you're asking of them. Would you like something to eat? It's a pretty short sentence, but they might not hear all of it. So if you're using long sentences, it definitely is challenging for the person that you're caring for. I also wanted to talk a little bit about diagnosis of the disease. There's definitely been more research within the last few years that's really helped us in the progression of understanding the disease and being able to diagnose it more quickly. Unfortunately, again, most people are diagnosed in the middle stages of Alzheimer's, meaning that they have really progressed. There's quite a bit of damage in the brain by the time they even receive the diagnosis. But typically, the process of receiving a diagnosis is obviously something you're going to have to do through your doctor. But I do love some information that I've run across recently where Teepa Snow was talking about a animal fluency test, which can help us to kind of establish a baseline and really be able to look at how our memory processing is going. It's a really simple test. I think it's kind of fun. So I hope that you will actually take some time and take this test for yourself and maybe do it with others if there's somebody you're concerned about. But it's just a simple screening, and it's something that we want to really pay attention to over a period of time. So it's not something that we're going to get a number today and say, oh, you need to go to the doctor and you need to look at this. There's obviously a concern. Rather, it's something over time, doing the same screening at different times just to see how your brain is doing with recalling information and being able to process information. So the animal fluency screening is just as simple as what it sounds like. You're going to have 1 minute to list as many animals as you can think of. So you want to have 2 people involved in this screening, one having a timer and tallying every animal that is named, another person just trying to name as many animals as they can think of. So you can name bird, or you can name robin, blue jay, bluebird, hawk, turkey, eagle, going down the different kinds of birds. So however you want to do that. If you name specific birds, we're not going to count bird, but we can count bird if you move from bird on to other animals. So you're just going to try to name as many animals as you can in 1 minute. No stress. Take a deep breath. Just do the best that you can. And this is going to just help you to establish your baseline. So if every 6 months you were to do this little screening again and see how you're doing, you might have more, you might have a few less, but the key is to really see if there's a big change in your ability to think of number of animals. If we think of our brain like a filing cabinet, we have to be able to go to that area, pull out the files that have animals on them, and really be able to find and grasp those names. And so this is something that lets us see how we're doing at accessing our information and just being able to really list as many as we can think of within a specific time. So we're putting a little bit of pressure on ourselves at the same time as doing something that we know people know animals. So this is a good screening. Again, if your numbers are changing, your baseline has a pretty big difference, then it's just something that you want to go to the doctor and say, I'm concerned. There seems to be a difference in my ability to recall things. And that opens the door for that conversation. The doctor from that point can refer you to someone else. They can do some different psychological tests. They can do some memory things with you. There's some different types of simple tests that can kind of take a look at how your memory is doing. But the key is really being able to then get them engaged and start looking at what's happening with your memory and what concerns you have. In fact, if you're on Medicare, there's an annual wellness exam that you should be having. And this is available every 12 months by your regular practitioner, where they take a look at your overall physical health, emotional health, and cognitive health. Just checking in to see how you're doing. Some of the cognitive questions or screenings that the doctor might use at the wellness exam are the mini-cog, the memory impairment screen, general practitioner assessment of cognition, or the mini mental status exam. These are all quick, simple exams that the doctor might use right there in the office to take a look at if there are any concerns and referrals might need to be made. There are tests now available. When my mom was diagnosed, the only way to actually diagnose Alzheimer's disease was through an autopsy. And so now we have imaging that allows us to see the tangles, which are a physical sign of Alzheimer's disease in the brain, as well as the protein building up within the brain. And these are things that, again, we're finding in brains well before we actually have the symptoms of Alzheimer's or dementia. And some of the latest research with medications are starting to attack these proteins and these things that are building up in the brain. So there's lots of great research going on right now, and definitely the ability to understand the condition of the brain, the cause of the dementia, again, helps us to see if it's vascular dementia, then that's having to do with the blood flow within the brain, not the protein buildups and the tangles. So really being able to talk to the doctor and let them start to investigate what's happening that's causing these dementia symptoms is very important so that you can get that diagnosis. Again, there's some medications that can help depending on what it is that's causing the memory loss or other concerns for you. But really just being able to get the early diagnosis helps you to have those conversations with your loved ones to really become engaged in understanding the disease and being able to really spend the time doing the things that you want to spend if this is what you're finding is going to be happening. We're finding that diet is also impacting the brain and the function within the brain. So you can do some research on that as well. But we find a heart healthy diet is also a brain healthy diet, which really makes sense, right? And so keeping that blood pressure down and all of those kinds of things that you do with a heart healthy diet really does impact the brain as well and helps you with prevention. Because we haven't found the exact cause of Alzheimer's, we know that this protein buildup and the tangles are happening. We just don't know why. And so that leaves still many, many questions. I would encourage you, if Alzheimer's is in your family like it is in mine, to really find a way to support the research that is happening out there, as well as to be a part of some of the healthy trials that are available. Again, because of my volunteering with the Alzheimer's Association, I know that they have a great program called Trial Match. It's available at alz.org to be able to enroll in or even just explore what trials are available in your area that you might qualify for. There's a support group that I'm a part of in my area, and I was able to talk with a woman who lost her mom to Alzheimer's disease, and she's actually in an exercise trial. And they have paid for her membership, and she goes so many times a week, and she goes back every 6 months to take some memory tests and see how she's doing and progressing. So just a simple trial like that is helping us to gather information on how exercise is impacting the brain and the memory of those people who are part of that trial. There are some simple trials like that you can be a part of. But I would encourage you to find out what will work for you and how you can help us in the fight against Alzheimer's by being a part of any of the trials that you can. Thank you for joining me today on a Season of Caring podcast, where I've discussed Alzheimer's disease, dementia, the impact of Alzheimer's on the brain, its ability to think, remember, and reason, hear as well as see, and how this disease is killing the brain and that impact. Hope that this has been some interesting information for you, that you'll do some additional research on trials that are available in your area, as well as take that animal fluency screening to have your own baseline and be able to follow up with that in the future as well. One final reminder, a Season of Caring podcast is created for the encouragement of family caregivers. If you have medical, financial, or legal questions, be sure to consult your local professionals and take heart in your season of caring.